I thought my twin was saving my dream until I heard my husband say the baby should stay with her. What they did not know was that I had already found the one clause that could destroy their entire new family. I did not scream. I smiled and started building the kind of revenge that comes with signatures and a judge's order. On the night my baby was born, my husband made a decision so shocking my twin went completely silent. My name is Mackenzie Murphy, and at 31 years old, I had successfully managed almost every variable in my life except for the one that mattered most. Growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I was the girl who organized her crayon box by color gradient and had her college applications finished 2 months before the deadline. I did not believe in luck. I believed in strategy. My life was a series of carefully plotted milestones on a timeline that I kept tucked away in the back of my mind like a sacred text. I would graduate with honors by 22. I would land a junior analyst role by 23. I would meet a man who was ambitious but kind by 25. We would marry by 27. Buy a colonial-style house with good bones and a fenced yard by 29. And by 30, we would have our first child. It was a beautiful, symmetrical plan. It was the American dream distilled into a checklist. And for a decade, I hit every single target with the precision of a sniper. I met Gavin when I was 25. Exactly as predicted. He was handsome in a way that felt safe broad shoulders, a steady smile, and a career in architectural consulting that complemented my own high-stakes work and risk management. We married when I was 27 in a ceremony that ran 5 minutes ahead of schedule. We bought the house in a quiet, leafy neighborhood just after my 29th birthday. Then came 30. The timeline stalled. The stall became a delay, and the delay became a concern. After 12 months of negative tests, white plastic sticks that I stared at until my eyes burned under the harsh bathroom lights, the concern became a medical investigation. I remember the day the timeline shattered. It was a Tuesday in mid-October. The sky outside the window of the specialist's office was a bruised purple, threatening rain. Dr. Evans was a kind woman with silver hair and hands that smelled of antiseptic soap. She did not use jargon to hide the truth, which I appreciated. Even as the words tore through me, she explained that it was a structural complication, a severe uterine anomaly. It was not something that could be fixed with hormones or a simple surgery. My uterus was not built to sustain a pregnancy to term. Attempting to carry a child would be dangerous, potentially fatal, for both the baby and me. I sat there, clutching my leather handbag, feeling the air leave the room. It was a physical sensation, like a vacuum sealing around my chest. I looked at the anatomical model on her desk, the pink plastic cross-section of a female body, and felt a wave of nausea. I had spent my entire life defining myself by my capability, by my ability to execute a plan, and now, my own biology was a faulty spreadsheet. I was broken hardware. Gavin was sitting next to me. He is 33, 2 years my senior, and he has always been the picture of composure. When Dr. Evans delivered the news, he did not cry. He did not squeeze my hand in that desperate, clawing way people do in movies. He nodded. He asked 2 questions about the certainty of the diagnosis, ensuring there was no margin for error. When we walked out to the parking lot, the rain had started. It was cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. "We will figure this out, Mackenzie," Gavin said. His voice was level. "There are other ways." I looked up at him, searching for shared grief, for the reflection of the shattering heartbreak I felt. I wanted him to be messy. I wanted him to be angry. Instead, his eyes were clear and terrifyingly calm. There was a coldness there, a flicker of something that looked less like love and more like calculation. It was as if he were looking at a car that had just failed inspection, weighing the cost of repairs against the trade-in value. I brushed the thought away immediately. I told myself I was projecting. I was the one who felt inadequate, so I was inventing judgment where there was only pragmatism. Gavin was a planner, just like me. He was simply processing the data, but that look stayed with me. For the next 3 months, I functioned on autopilot. I work for Summit and Vail Risk Solutions, a firm that handles crisis management and liability assessment for mid-sized corporations. My job is to look at a company, identify the structural weaknesses, predict where the collapse might happen, and reinforce it. The irony was suffocating. I spent 10 hours a day advising CEOs on how to avoid disaster, yet I went home to a silent house that felt like a crime scene of my former dreams. I became a ghost in my own life. I woke up at 6 in the morning, drank black coffee, went to the office, stared at actuarial tables, and came home. I stopped looking at the nursery we had half-planned the room at the end of the hall that we had painted a soft, neutral cream color. I kept the door shut. One evening, I found Gavin in the kitchen, scrolling through his tablet. He looked up, offering a tight smile. "I was thinking," he said, "we should look into the logistics of adoption, or surrogacy. We need to start moving if we want to stay somewhat on track." On track, as if we were discussing a construction project delay due to bad weather. "I am not ready to talk about logistics, Gavin," I said, my voice sounding thin and brittle to my own ears. "I am still grieving the fact that I will never feel a kick. I will never know what it is like to share a body with my child." He sighed, a short, sharp sound through his nose. "Grieving is fine, Kenzie, but dwelling is inefficient. We want a family. This is a hurdle, not a wall." He was right. Technically, but emotionally, he felt miles away. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Aris because I could feel myself slipping into a place where getting out of bed felt like lifting 1,000 pounds. Dr. Aris was different from the corporate coaches I was used to. She did not care about my productivity. "You feel like you have lost your womanhood," she said during our 4th session. It was not a question. "I feel like a defective product," I corrected her. "I was built to do this one thing, biologically speaking. It is the primary directive, and I cannot do it." "You are more than a vessel, Mackenzie," she told me sternly. "You are a wife, a sister, a brilliant risk analyst. This diagnosis changes your path, but it does not end your life. You need to separate your identity from your uterus." It took weeks of tearing myself apart in that beige office to start believing her, but slowly, the fog lifted. I began to treat my situation like a case at Summit and Vale. If Plan A is compromised, you do not abandon the mission. You activate Plan B. Gavin and I started the research phase. We sat at our dining room table, surrounded by glossy brochures from agencies and printouts of legal statutes. Adoption was the first avenue we explored. I approached it with my usual rigor. I read the statistics. I looked at the wait times. 2 years, 3 years, sometimes 5. The uncertainty was a variable I could not control. The idea of falling in love with a potential match, only to have the birth mother change her mind at the 11th hour, terrified me. In my line of work, we call that a catastrophic failure point. "It feels too random," I told Gavin one night, pushing a stack of papers away. "I cannot handle the uncertainty. I need to know that at the end of this, there is a baby." "Then surrogacy," Gavin said. He had been pushing for this option more aggressively lately. "It is your egg, my sperm. It is our baby. 100%. We just need an oven." I flinched at the word oven. It was so clinical, so detached. But again, he was technically correct. We began interviewing agencies that facilitated gestational surrogacy. This was where my professional paranoia kicked into overdrive. I read the profiles of potential surrogates like I was vetting a CEO for a merger. I looked for cracks. I looked for liabilities. The cost was staggering, anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000 once you factored in medical bills, legal fees, and agency cuts. We had the money. We had been saving for years, and our dual incomes put us in a comfortable bracket. But it wasn't the money that kept me awake at night. It was the lack of control. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fans spinning rhythmically above us. The thought of a stranger carrying my child made my skin crawl. It wasn't snobbery. It was a primal, visceral fear. Who was this woman? The agencies did background checks. Sure, they screened for drugs and criminal history, but they couldn't screen for judgment. They couldn't screen for stress. I imagined a woman I didn't know, living in a town I had never visited, carrying the most precious thing I would ever create. What if she ate sushi? What if she had a glass of wine when she thought no one was looking? What if she got into an argument with her boyfriend and her cortisol levels spiked, bathing my developing baby in stress hormones? I work in risk. I know that you cannot eliminate all risk, but you must mitigate it. Handing my biological child to a stranger felt like handing the keys to a nuclear power plant to a teenager and hoping for the best. I don't think I can do it, Gavin, I whispered into the darkness of our bedroom. He rolled over, his voice heavy with sleep. Do what? Trust a stranger, I said. I can't. I look at these profiles, and all I see are variables, unknowns. If I can't be there every second, if I can't feel the baby moving, how do I know she's safe? Gavin didn't answer immediately. Then he said, We don't have many other options. Kenzie, unless you want to give up. I didn't want to give up, but the anxiety was eating me alive. I found myself scrutinizing every woman I saw on the street. Was she trustworthy? Would she be a good vessel? It was maddening. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, my parents came over for dinner. My twin sister, Briar, came with them. Briar and I are identical physically, but that is where the similarity ends. While I am sharp angles, tailored suits, and 5-year plans, Briar is soft edges, linen dresses, and intuition. She works as a florist, spending her days surrounded by things that bloom and fade. She has always been the one who feels things deeply, the one who cries at commercials, the one who remembers everyone's birthday. We were in the kitchen. Gavin was in the living room watching football with my father. Frank, my mother, Diane, was chopping vegetables with a manic energy, chattering about a neighbor's renovation. I was standing by the sink, washing lettuce, feeling that familiar weight in my chest. I had told my family about the diagnosis a month ago. They had been sympathetic, but there was a pity in their eyes that I detested. How is the agency search going? Briar asked. She was leaning against the counter, holding a glass of iced tea. Her voice was gentle, lacking the prying tone my mother often used. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands on a towel. I looked at her. It was like looking in a mirror from an alternate universe, a version of me that wasn't hardened by corporate warfare. It is a nightmare, I admitted, my voice dropping so the men in the other room wouldn't hear. I hate it. I hate looking at these women's faces in a binder. I feel like I am shopping for a human being, and I am terrified. Bree, I am terrified that I won't know if they are taking care of the baby. I can't micromanage a pregnancy from across the state. Briar set her glass down. She looked at me, really looked at me, with those eyes that were the exact same shade of hazel as mine. You need control, Briar said softly. You always have. You need to know the baby is safe. Yes, I said, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. I need to know. The kitchen went quiet. The only sound was the knife hitting the cutting board where my mother was slicing peppers. She had stopped, though. She was looking at Briar. Briar took a step toward me. She reached out and took my cold hands in her warm ones. Her palms were rough from working with flower stems, but her touch was incredibly grounding. You don't need a stranger, Mackenzie, she said. Her voice was clear, steady, and devoid of any hesitation. You don't need an agency. You need family. I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. Briar, what are you saying? She squeezed my hands tighter. A smile touched her lips, a smile that was pure, radiant, and terrifyingly generous. I will do it, she said. Let me carry the baby. You don't have to trust a stranger. You trust me. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. I looked at my sister, my other half, the person who had shared a womb with me 31 years ago. You would do that, I whispered. Briar, it's 9 months of your life. It is your body. It is our family, she said, pulling me into a hug. I want to do this. For you. For us. Over her shoulder, I saw Gavin standing in the doorway. He had come in for a beer. He had heard. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Briar. And for the first time in months, the cold calculation in his eyes was gone, replaced by something bright and eager. He looked at her not just with gratitude, but with an intensity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That, Gavin said, his voice smooth and deeply satisfied, is the perfect solution. I buried my face in my sister's shoulder, sobbing with relief, thinking my prayers had been answered. I didn't see the glance Gavin exchanged with my mother. I didn't see the way the pieces were falling into place, not for my benefit, but for a design I couldn't yet see. I just thought my sister was saving me. The weeks following Briar's offer were a blur of administrative momentum that felt less like a medical process and more like a coronation. My sister did not just step into the role of surrogate, she ascended to it. It was as if she had been waiting in the wings for 31 years, preparing for this specific performance of benevolence. She became my shadow, but a shadow that radiated light. Briar took time off from her flower shop, claiming she had competent assistant managers who could handle the daily orders, just so she could drive me to every preliminary appointment. She sat in the waiting rooms of the fertility clinic, flipping through magazines with a serene smile while I vibrated with anxiety. When I had to undergo the retrieval procedure, a painful and invasive process to harvest the eggs that would eventually become my child, Briar was there with a cooler full of homemade bone broth and heating pads she had sewn herself, filled with organic rice and lavender. It was overwhelming. It was perfect. And that perfection was the first thing that should have triggered my alarms. In my line of work, when a quarterly report shows 0 variance and perfect projected growth, we audit it immediately. Nothing in nature or business is that flawless, but I was not acting as a risk manager. I was a desperate woman who had been thrown a lifeline. I grabbed it with both hands, ignoring the friction burn. Gavin was the variable that confused me the most. My husband is a man who researches the best brand of dishwasher detergent for 3 days before making a purchase. He reads the terms and service agreements for software updates. Yet, with the most monumental decision of our lives, he suspended all critical thought the night after Briar made her offer. I sat Gavin down in our living room. I had a notebook open, ready to list the pros and cons, the financial implications, and the psychological risks of involving a family member. "We need to talk about the boundaries," I started, pen hovering over the paper. "Mixing family with this kind of legal arrangement is complex. If Briar changes her mind, or if she gets attached..." Gavin cut me off. He was pacing the room, an energy in his step that I hadn't seen in years. "Mackenzie, stop. Just stop. You are looking for problems where there are solutions. Briar is your twin. She shares your DNA. She loves us. Who could possibly be a better candidate? A stranger who does it for a paycheck? No. This is optimal." "Optimal," I repeated, the word tasting like chalk. "It is also messy. Gavin, what if we disagree on medical decisions? What if she wants to be in the delivery room? We haven't even discussed compensation." "We will pay her whatever is fair," Gavin said dismissively, waving a hand. "But think about the savings on agency fees. Think about the peace of mind. I don't need to interview her. I know her. You know her. This is a no-brainer." He turned to look at me then, his eyes bright. "Why are you fighting this? Do you want a baby or not?" That question shut me down. It was a weaponized binary. Of course I wanted a baby, by framing my caution as a lack of desire. He successfully silenced my instincts. I closed the notebook. I felt a flicker of unease, a tiny, cold draft in a warm room, because his acceptance was too rapid. It lacked the friction of his usual personality. It was as if he had already run the numbers and reached a conclusion before I even opened the spreadsheet. My parents, Diane and Frank, only amplified this momentum. To them, this wasn't a medical arrangement. It was a saga. They came over for dinner 2 times a week now, bringing wine and an oppressive amount of enthusiasm. "It is destiny," my mother declared one evening, pouring a glass of Chardonnay for Briar, who declined it with a performative shake of her head because she was pre-preparing her body. "It is how it was meant to be. One sister helping the other. It is biblical. Almost." My father, Frank, a man who usually reserved his emotional capacity for the stock market and golf, clapped Gavin on the shoulder. "Keeps it in the blood. Son, that is what matters. You know exactly what you're getting. No surprises." I sat at the end of the table, picking at my roast chicken. I felt like a spectator at my own miracle. They were writing a story about the Murphy sisters, the bond that conquered infertility, the triumph of family values. I was the protagonist, yet I had the fewest lines. Briar was the hero. Gavin was the visionary producer. My parents were the adoring audience. I just want to make sure we do this legally, I said quietly during a lull in the conversation. I have found a lawyer. Her name is Daphne Monroe. She specializes in third-party reproduction law. The table went quiet. Briar looked hurt, her lower lip trembling just slightly. A lawyer, Kenzie. Do we really need to be so formal? I am your sister. It is for your protection, too. Briar, I said, feeling like the villain for bringing reality into their fantasy. It protects everyone. Mackenzie is right, Gavin said, surprising me. He looked at Briar with a softness that made my chest ache. We want you to be safe, Briar. We want everything to be perfect for you. The way he said for you instead of for us or for the baby struck me as odd, but I filed it away. We met Daphne Monroe 10 days later. Her office was in the financial district, a stark contrast to the cozy, floral-filled world Briar inhabited. The building was all glass and steel, cold and imposing. Daphne herself was a woman of sharp lines. She wore a charcoal suit that looked like armor, and her hair was cut in a precise, angular bob. She did not offer us coffee. She did not coo when I mentioned we were trying for a baby. She sat behind a desk that looked like a slab of black ice and looked at the three of us, me, Gavin, and Briar. I generally advise against intra-family surrogacy arrangements, Daphne stated flatly. She did not look at her notes. She looked directly at Briar. Boundaries are difficult to enforce when you share a Thanksgiving table. Emotional entanglement is almost guaranteed. We are very close, Briar said, her voice breathy and sweet. I just want to help my sister be a mom. Daphne's eyes narrowed slightly behind her rimless glasses. She was not charmed. She was assessing a liability. That is a lovely sentiment. My job is to translate that sentiment into a binding contract that holds up in a court of law if you decide you want to keep the baby. Ms. Murphy. Briar gasped. I would never. It is Mackenzie's baby. Biologically, yes. Legally. Not until the ink is dry and the pre-birth orders are signed, Daphne corrected. She turned to me. The contract will be explicit. Mackenzie and Gavin Murphy are the intended parents. They assume all financial and legal responsibility from the moment of conception. Briar Murphy is the gestational carrier. She surrenders all parental rights. She has no say in the child's upbringing, medical care after birth, or residence. She agrees to selective reduction if medically necessary. She agrees to abstain from alcohol, drugs, and specific high-risk behaviors during the pregnancy. Daphne slid a thick document across the black desk. It was heavy. It was the physical manifestation of my control, the paper shield I needed to survive this. I added a clause regarding privacy and social media, Daphne added, her gaze flicking to Gavin and then back to Briar. No posting about the pregnancy without express permission from the intended parents. This is a private medical matter. Of course, Gavin said, reaching for the pen. He didn't even read it. He just wanted to sign. Where do we sign? Read it, Daphne commanded. It was the first time she raised her voice, though the volume didn't change, only the intensity. All of you, read every page. We spent the next 40 minutes in silence. I read every word. I checked the indemnity clauses. I checked the medical power of attorney sections. It was watertight. It was ruthless. It was exactly what I wanted. When I looked up, Briar was staring out the window. The contract opened to the signature page. She hadn't turned a page in 5 minutes. Are you okay with the psychological evaluation requirement? I asked her. I don't need a shrink to tell me I love you, Briar said, turning to me with wet eyes. I'm ready. Kenzie. She grabbed the pen from the table. She didn't hesitate. She didn't pause to consider the weight of signing away a child she would carry for 9 months. She signed her name with a flourish, the loop of the B large and decorative. There, she said, pushing the paper toward me. It is done. It is your baby. Kenzie. I am just the babysitter. I took the pen. My hand was shaking. This was it. The timeline was restarting. I signed my name next to hers, my signature tight and cramped compared to her flowing script. Gavin signed last. Thank you, I whispered to Briar, tears finally spilling over. Thank you for giving me my life back. Briar reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. We are going to be so happy, All of us. Daphne Monroe watched the exchange without a flicker of emotion. She took the contract back, checked the signatures, and placed it in a folder. I will file the necessary motions with the court to establish parentage before the birth. Do not deviate from this agreement. If you change a doctor, if you change a hospital, if you change a single term, you tell me. Informal agreements are the death of custody cases. We walked out of the office into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. I felt lighter than I had in 2 years. The legal weight was off my shoulders. We had a plan. We had a contract. Let's celebrate, Gavin said. He sounded exhilarated. Dinner on me. Anywhere you want. Sushi, Briar said with a giggle. Before I can't have it anymore. We went to a high-end Japanese restaurant 3 blocks away. The mood was electric. I ordered a bottle of sake for the table, feeling a strange, delirious joy. I watched my husband and my sister laughing over the menu. Gavin was relaxed, his shoulders down, his smile easy. He made a joke about spicy tuna, and Briar threw her head back, laughing a little too loud. Her hand brushing his arm. It was a casual gesture, a sister-in-law laughing at a joke. But then the laughter died down, and the silence stretched for 2 seconds too long. Gavin didn't look away. He was looking at Briar's face flushed from the walk, and the excitement with an expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just familial affection. It was a look of possession. It was the way he used to look at the architectural models of buildings he had designed, but hadn't yet built. He was looking at her like she was the structure, and I was just the zoning permit that allowed the construction to begin. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then he blinked, turned to me, and smiled. To us, he said, raising his glass. To the family. To the family, I repeated, clinking my glass against his. The sake tasted sharp and hot. I drank it all, drowning the sudden, irrational thought that I was the only person at the table who didn't know what the toast really meant. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself it was the trauma of infertility making me jealous of the connection they now shared. But as we walked to the car later, Gavin walking a step ahead with Briar while I trailed behind to check an email from work, I saw him open the car door for her. He placed his hand on the small of her back to guide her in. His hand lingered there, just for a moment, against the fabric of her floral dress. It was a small thing, a nothing thing. But as I watched them, the joyful script my parents were writing in my head began to blur, and the cold, hard text of Daphne Monroe's contract was the only thing that felt real. The biology of creating life became a regimen of chemistry and timing. The romance was gone, replaced by the sharp sting of needles and the cold gel of ultrasound wands. I became the administrator of my own miracle. Every morning at 6:30, I sterilized the kitchen counter, lined up the vials of progesterone, and prepared the syringe. Briar would sit on the bar stool, hiking up her pajama top with a grimace that looked more like martyrdom than discomfort. I was the one who plunged the needle into her hip. I was the one who massaged the site afterward. It was a strange intimacy, clinical yet profound. I told myself this was my first act of mothering tending to the vessel that held my future. The transfer day was a Tuesday. The clinic was quiet. I held Briar's hand while the doctor, a man with a soothing baritone voice, guided the catheter on the monitor. A tiny flash of white light appeared our embryo, my genetic material, Gavin's genetic material, placing itself into my sister's lining. I squeezed Briar's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. 10 days later, the phone rang. It was the nurse. Her voice was bright, professional, and life-altering. The beta numbers were strong. We were pregnant. I dropped the phone and screamed. It was a raw, primal sound that had been trapped in my throat for 2 years. Gavin swept me up in a hug, spinning me around the kitchen island. Briar stood in the doorway, smiling a beatific, serene smile, her hands already resting protectively over her flat stomach. "We did it," she whispered. That weekend, Briar made a suggestion that seemed logical at the time. She lived in a walk-up apartment across town, on the 3rd floor. It was drafty, and the stairs were steep. "I should stay here," she said, looking around our spacious, climate-controlled living room. Just for the first trimester. Or maybe the whole time. I want you to be part of this. Kenzie. I want you to see the morning sickness. I want you to feel the first kick. If I am over there, you miss all the magic. It is your baby. You should witness the process. Gavin nodded immediately. She is right. Plus, I don't like the idea of her walking up those icy stairs in January. We have the guest room. It has its own bath. It makes perfect sense. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. My home was my sanctuary, the one place where I could retreat from the chaos of the world. But how could I say no? She was carrying my child. She was making the ultimate sacrifice. Denying her comfort felt ungrateful. Of course, I said. Move in. That decision marked the beginning of a slow, subtle displacement. I threw myself into the role of the expectant mother with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. I bought a leather-bound journal and began writing letters to the baby every night. I documented everything. Today your aunt ate ginger snaps for nausea. Today you are the size of a blueberry. I attended every ultrasound, sitting in the chair next to the bed, straining my eyes to read the grayscale monitor. I bought a crib made of sustainable oak that cost $800. I bought neutral-toned onesies. I was building a nest, but nests require resources. The surrogacy costs were ballooning. We were covering Briar's rent on her empty apartment because she didn't want to give up her lease. We were paying for organic groceries because Briar insisted the baby needed clean fuel. There were supplements, acupuncture appointments to hold the pregnancy, and maternity clothes that she needed earlier than I expected. I am a risk manager. I looked at our savings account and saw the trajectory. We were bleeding cash. I'm going to take on the Sterling account, I told Gavin one evening. We were in the kitchen. Briar was on the sofa, watching a reality show, her feet propped up on the coffee table. Gavin frowned. The Sterling audit? That is a nightmare project. You will be working 60 hours a week. It pays a 20% bonus upon completion, I said, pouring myself a glass of water. We need the buffer. The medical bills are higher than we budgeted. If you think it is best, Gavin said, turning back to the stove. He was making pasta carbonara, Briar's favorite. I can hold down the fort here. So, I went to work. I left the house at 7 in the morning and often didn't return until 8 at night. I sat in boardrooms, analyzing liability clauses and arguing with CFOs, telling myself that every hour I billed was a brick in the foundation of my child's future. I was the provider. It was a noble role, but while I was providing, Gavin and Briar were living. I would come home late, exhausted, my eyes stinging from staring at spreadsheets, to find the house smelling of roast chicken or baking bread. Gavin and Briar would be on the couch, a blanket thrown over both of them, laughing at some inside joke I didn't understand. How was work? Gavin would ask, but his eyes would barely leave the television screen. Long, I would say. How was the baby? Good, Briar would answer, rubbing her stomach. He or she liked the spicy soup Gavin made for lunch. Lots of fluttering. Fluttering? I asked, dropping my briefcase. Already it is only 16 weeks. I am very in tune with my body, Briar said with a soft, knowing smile. I can feel things others can't. I felt a spike of jealousy so sharp it nearly doubled me over. I wanted to be the one feeling the flutter. I wanted to be the one eating the soup. Instead, I was the one eating a cold sandwich over the sink while they finished a movie. Gavin started working from home 3 days a week. To keep an eye on Briar, he told me. Make sure she doesn't lift anything heavy. It sounded reasonable, but the atmosphere in the house shifted. It became hermetic. They had a rhythm. They knew which coffee pods were low. They knew which neighbor's dog barked at 2 in the afternoon. I was the visitor in my own home, the paycheck that kept the lights on while they played house. Then came the social media post. I was at my desk at Summit and Vale, eating a salad from a plastic container. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from Instagram. Briar had posted a photo. It was an artistic shot, black and white. Her hands were cradling a small but visible bump. She was wearing one of Gavin's oversized flannels. I recognized the pattern immediately. The caption read, "Sometimes love finds a new shape. Grateful for this journey and the people walking it with me. Blessed new beginnings." There was no mention of surrogacy, no mention of me, No mention that the baby wasn't hers. I scrolled through the comments. You look glowing. Bree. So happy for you. You're going to be an amazing mama. She liked every comment. She didn't correct a single one. I felt cold. I called Gavin immediately. Did you see Briar's post? I asked, keeping my voice low so my assistant wouldn't hear. Yeah, it's cute, Gavin said. I could hear the dishwasher running in the background. Gavin, people think it is her baby. She is not correcting them. The contract says she has to protect our privacy. Oh, come on. Kenzie. Gavin sighed. He sounded annoyed. She is excited. Let her have her moment. She is doing all the heavy lifting. Who cares what people on the internet think? We know the truth. Don't be petty. Petty. The word slapped me. I hung up, feeling small and unreasonable. I told myself he was right. I was being hormonal without the hormones. I was being territorial. But the unease didn't leave. It festered. 2 weeks later, my parents came over for a Sunday brunch. The dynamic had solidified. I was the bustling hostess, refilling coffees and clearing plates, while Briar sat in the armchair like a queen bee, surrounded by throw pillows. My mother, Diane, was cooing over an ultrasound picture stuck to the fridge. Look at that profile, Diane said, beaming. Just like Briar's when she was a baby. Same nose. It is Mackenzie's egg, Mom, I said from the sink, scrubbing a pan a little too hard. So it would look like me too, since we are identical twins. Diane waved a hand dismissively. Oh, you know what I mean. It is just seeing her carry it. It feels so natural. Briar was always the maternal one. I froze. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing. My father, Frank, chimed in, but he didn't look at me. He was looking at Gavin. Just that Briar has that softness. You have always been the career girl. Mackenzie, you have the drive. Briar has the heart. The room went silent. The clatter of the pan I dropped back into the sink sounded like a gunshot. I have a heart, I said, my voice trembling. I am working myself into the ground to pay for this baby, to pay for this house, to pay for the food you are eating. Mackenzie, Gavin said sharply. Calm down. Your dad didn't mean it like that. You are tired. You have been working too much. I am working because this family is expensive. I snapped. Briar started to cry. Silent, picturesque tears that rolled down her cheeks. I am sorry, she whispered. I feel like a burden. I just wanted to help. Immediately, Gavin and my parents were around her, comforting her. No, sweetie, you are a blessing, my mother soothed. Mackenzie is just stressed. Don't upset the baby. I walked out of the room. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the villain? Was I the cold, unfeeling career woman they made me out to be? I decided to apologize. I needed to de-escalate. I needed to be the rational one. Later that night, the house was quiet. Gavin was in the shower. I went downstairs to check my email on the shared tablet we kept on the kitchen island. It was usually used for recipes or controlling the smart home system. I unlocked the screen. It was still open to the calendar app. I went to click over to my email, but a block of color caught my eye. It was an appointment scheduled for next Tuesday at 3 p.m. The title was vague, consultation, PR. I frowned. PR, public relations. Gavin was an architect. Why did he need PR? I tapped on the event to see the details. The location field was filled in. It wasn't a PR firm. It was an address on 4th Street. Porter Reynolds, Family Law Litigation. I stared at the screen. The address burned into my retinas. Daphne Monroe, our lawyer, was at a firm called Monroe Associates. This was a different firm, a firm known for aggressive custody disputes. Why was my husband meeting with a high-conflict divorce lawyer without telling me I heard the water shut off upstairs? I quickly closed the calendar app, wiped the screen with my sleeve to remove my fingerprints, and set the tablet back exactly where I found it. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't sensitive. I was a risk manager, and I had just found the data point that predicted the collapse. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed next to Gavin. He smelled of soap and innocence. "You okay?" he asked, reaching out to touch my shoulder. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." "Good," he said, turning off the lamp. "Sleep tight." I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, listening to his breathing even out. The timeline I had built, the one I thought I had saved, was gone. A new timeline had started, and this one didn't end with a nursery. It ended in a courtroom. The Sterling account audit closed 3 days early. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just past 2 o'clock, and the sun was shining with a mocking brightness that felt entirely at odds with the knot of anxiety that had been tightening in my stomach for a week. I had left the office with a bottle of expensive non-alcoholic sparkling cider tucked into my bag and a foolish, fragile hope in my chest. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to believe that the lawyer's appointment I had seen on the calendar was for something benign, perhaps a surprise estate plan, or a legal adjustment for the baby's trust. I wanted to believe that my husband and my sister were simply bonding over the miracle of life, and that my jealousy was a toxic byproduct of my own insecurity. I parked my car down the street, not wanting the engine noise to announce my arrival. I wanted to walk in, see them laughing over a puzzle or watching a cooking show, and feel the relief wash over me. I wanted to feel stupid for doubting them. The house was silent when I unlocked the front door. It was not the empty silence of an unoccupied space, but the heavy, pregnant silence of a room holding its breath. My heels clicked too loudly on the hardwood of the foyer, so I slipped them off. Moving in my stocking feet, I headed toward the living room, the bottle of cider heavy in my hand. As I approached the archway that separated the dining room from the living area, I heard a voice. It was Gavin's voice, but it lacked the uncertain, placating tone he had used with me for the past few months. It was firm, decisive. "We cannot keep pretending," Gavin said. "The timeline is getting too short. We need the baby to stay with the people who are actually together." I froze. The air in my lungs turned into solid ice. I pressed my back against the wall. Shielded by the oversized ficus plant we had bought together 3 years ago, I should have walked in. I should have demanded an explanation. But my training kicked in. When you discover a breach, you do not alert the intruder immediately. You assess the damage. I leaned forward just enough to see through the gap between the leaves. The scene before me was a tableau of betrayal so perfect it looked staged. Gavin was sitting on the beige sectional, his body turned entirely toward Briar. He was holding both of her hands in his. Briar was weeping, her face flushed, her baby bump, my baby, resting against her thighs. But it wasn't just them. My parents, Diane and Frank, were standing behind the sofa. They were not looking at Gavin with shock or disapproval. They were looking at the pair with a benevolent, solemn pride, like witnesses at a wedding. "It is going to destroy her," Briar sobbed, though she did not pull her hands away from Gavin. "She has wanted this for so long. I can't bear to hurt her." My mother, Diane, stepped forward and placed a hand on Briar's shoulder. Her voice was soothing, the same tone she used to use when I skinned my knee as a child. "Mackenzie will understand. Sweetie, you know she will. Mackenzie is logical. She is always reasonable." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Reasonable. My entire life, my compliance, my ability to suppress my emotions for the sake of peace, was being weaponized against me. They were banking on my trauma response. They were counting on me to be the good girl who cleans up the mess so no one else has to be uncomfortable. "She works 80 hours a week," Gavin added, his voice smooth, justifying the knife he was twisting in my back. "She is married to her career. Look at her. She is never here. You are the one nurturing our child. Briar, you are the one who is present." "I feel like I am the mom," Briar whispered, her voice trembling with a terrifying conviction. "I feel him moving. I know his rhythms. Mackenzie, she treats this like a project. She buys the crib. She signs the checks. But she doesn't feel it. She will never understand this feeling. Contract is paper." My father, Frank, said gruffly, crossing his arms. "Bond is real. Blood is real. You two have formed a family here while she was out chasing bonuses. It is the right thing to do for the child." I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the floor, My hand clamped over my mouth to stifle the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. They had rewritten reality. In their version of the story, my hard work to pay their bills was abandonment. My respect for boundaries was coldness. My trust was negligence. I did not storm in. I did not throw the bottle of cider. I knew, with a sudden, crystalline clarity, that if I showed emotion now, they would use it. They would paint me as hysterical, unstable, unfit. I stood up, my legs shaking violently, and retreated. I walked backward, step by silent step, until I was in the foyer. I put my shoes back on. I opened the front door and closed it again. Harder this time, announcing my presence. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding tinny and foreign to my own ears. "I am home early." I heard the scramble in the living room, the hushed whispers. By the time I walked in, they had rearranged themselves. Gavin was standing by the window. Briar was wiping her eyes with a tissue. My parents were studying the bookshelf. "Mackenzie," my mother said, her smile too bright, too brittle. "We didn't expect you until 6. We finished the audit," I said. I looked at Gavin. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Is everything okay?" "You all look serious." "Just talking about the baby shower," Briar lied. She patted the spot next to her on the sofa. "Come sit." I looked at that spot, the space where she and my husband had just been holding hands planning my erasure, and I felt a wave of nausea. "I actually have a migraine," I said. "I am going to go lie down. Don't let me interrupt." I walked past them. I walked past the people who were supposed to be my safety net, and I went upstairs to the guest room where I had been sleeping lately to give Briar space. I locked the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall for 4 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't have the luxury of grief. I was in a crisis management simulation, and the threat level was critical. At 8 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. "Mackenzie." It was Gavin. "Can we talk?" "Come in," I said. He entered, holding a manila envelope. He looked pained. He looked like a man who had practiced his speech in the mirror a dozen times. He sat on the edge of the bed, sighing heavily. "I don't know how to say this," he began, looking at his hands. "But I have been doing a lot of thinking about us, about the baby." "Go on," I said. I was a statue. I was a recording device. "I think we have grown apart," he said. "This process, it has shown me that we want different things. You are so driven, Mackenzie. You have this big career, and I realized I want a simpler life. I want a family that is present." He paused, waiting for me to argue. When I didn't, he continued, emboldened. "I have developed feelings for Briar." He confessed. He said it as if it were a tragic accident, like getting struck by lightning, rather than a choice he made every day in my house. "And she feels the same. We think it is best for the baby to be raised by 2 parents who are in love, who are together." He slid the envelope toward me. "I had these drawn up," he said. "It is a petition for divorce and a modification to the surrogacy agreement. If you sign over full custody to me, I will assume all the debt. You can walk away clean. You can focus on your career. It is what you are good at. Right?" I looked at the papers. He was offering me an exit. He truly believed he was doing me a favor. He thought I was cold enough to trade my child for a clean balance sheet. "And Briar?" I asked. "She is okay with this." "She wants the baby to have a father," Gavin said. "She is willing to step in as the mother figure. We have discussed it with your parents. They agree it is the most stable option." The betrayal was total. It was a closed loop. "If I don't sign," I asked. Gavin's face hardened. The mask slipped, revealing the stranger beneath. "Then we go to court. And Mackenzie, look at the optics. You are a workaholic who couldn't carry a child. Briar is the biological aunt who has bonded with the baby for 6 months. I am the biological father. Who do you think a judge will choose? Do you really want to drag this through the mud? Do you want to bankrupt yourself fighting a losing battle?" He was right. In a standard custody battle, I was at a disadvantage. They had the narrative. They had the bond. "I need a pen," I said. Gavin blinked, surprised by my surrender. He handed me a pen from his pocket. I signed the divorce papers. I signed the acknowledgement of service. I did not sign the custody modification, yet I told him I needed to have Daphne review the language for liability reasons, appealing to his belief that I was a corporate drone. "That is fair," he said, visibly relieved. He stood up, looking like a weight had been lifted. "I am sorry. Kenzie, I really am. But one day, you will see, this was for the best." He left the room. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade down the hall. I waited until I heard the murmur of voices downstairs relieved. Congratulatory voices. They thought they had won. They thought reasonable Mackenzie had folded just like she always did. I got up and went to my closet. I pulled out my briefcase and unlocked the hidden compartment where I kept the original, notarized copy of the surrogacy contract Daphne Monroe had drafted. I sat under the desk lamp, my hands trembling not with sadness, but with adrenaline. I turned the pages, past the financial clauses, past the liability waivers, until I found Article 14. Section C. I had glossed over it when we first signed. It had seemed like standard legalese, a clause Daphne had insisted on just in case of catastrophic relationship breakdown. The transfer of custody clause. It read, "In the event of a dispute regarding the custody or disposition of the child prior to birth, or in the event of a dissolution of marriage between the intended parents, the gestational carrier, Briar Murphy, shall have no legal authority to make medical decisions regarding the birth or the child. Furthermore, the designated birthing facility requires the physical presence and wet signature of the legal mother Mackenzie Murphy to authorize the release of the infant or to authorize any deviation from the standard birthing plan. Failure to obtain said signature results in the infant being placed in the immediate temporary custody of Child Protective Services until a court order is issued." I read it twice, 3 times. Gavin and Briar thought they could just walk out of the hospital with the baby because they were together. They thought they could sideline me, but Daphne had built a wall they didn't even know existed. Without my signature, that baby could not leave the hospital with them. Without my presence, they were legally kidnapping a child. And there was one more line in the addendum. Any attempt by the gestational carrier to alter the birth plan or hospital location without the written consent of the legal mother shall be considered a breach of contract, carrying a financial penalty of $150,000, payable immediately. I closed the folder. A cold, sharp smile touched my lips for the first time in months. They wanted a war. They wanted to use the law to steal my life. But they had forgotten one thing. I read the fine print, and I was done being reasonable. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I packed 2 suitcases with the efficiency of a soldier breaking camp. I took my clothes, my laptop, my birth certificate, and the hard copy of the surrogacy contract. I left everything else, the furniture, the wedding china, the memories behind. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in the waiting room of Monroe and Associates, holding a check for $5,000 to cover Daphne's initial retainer for the litigation phase. Daphne Monroe did not look surprised to see me. She ushered me into her office, her face unreadable as I recounted the events of the previous evening. I spared her the emotional details. I did not tell her about the tears or the feeling of my heart shredding in my chest. I told her the facts. My husband and sister were cohabitating. They intended to keep the baby, and they had presented me with divorce papers and a custody modification request. Daphne listened in silence, her fingers steepled together. When I finished, she picked up the contract I had placed on her desk. She flipped to Article 14. "They are arrogant," Daphne said, her voice cool and sharp like cut glass. "They are operating under the assumption that family court is a morality play, where the person who cries the prettiest tears wins. They are wrong. It is a court of law. And legally, they have tied their own hands." She tapped the page with a manicured fingernail. "This clause," she said, "the one requiring the legal mother's signature for hospital release, it is the kill switch. Without you, that baby is a ward of the state the moment it leaves the nursery. If they try to leave with him, it is kidnapping. If the hospital lets them leave, it is gross negligence. We are going to remind the hospital of that fact before Briar even goes into labor." I felt a cold surge of satisfaction. "What do I need to do?" "Disappear," Daphne commanded. "Do not argue with them. Do not send angry texts. Do not appeal to their conscience. Let them believe you are defeated. Let them believe you are the cold, unfeeling career woman they say you are. The more comfortable they get, the more mistakes they will make. I need you to gather evidence. Not of their affair. The court does not care about adultery as much as you think, but of their intent to violate the contract. I left her office and drove straight to a rental complex on the edge of the city. I signed a 6-month lease on a 400-square-foot studio apartment. It was nothing like the colonial house I had spent years curating. It had gray laminate floors, a single window overlooking a parking lot, and a kitchenette that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. It was perfect. It was a bunker. I pushed the small dining table against the wall and turned it into my command center. I went to an office supply store and bought a whiteboard, color-coded markers, and 3 external hard drives. I was not Mackenzie Murphy, the heartbroken wife. I was Mackenzie Murphy, senior risk analyst, and I was managing a catastrophic liability. My first task was digital forensics. I created a burner account on Instagram to monitor Briar and Gavin without alerting them. What I found was a goldmine of incriminating stupidity. They were drunk on their own narrative. Briar was posting daily. March 12th. A photo of the nursery. They had repainted the neutral cream walls a soft blue. The caption read, "Building a nest for our little prince. So grateful for a partner who builds things with his hands and his heart." She tagged Gavin. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder labeled Intent to Parent, Briar. March 14th. A video of my mother, Diane, holding up a tiny knitted hat. "For Briar's baby," she cooed in the video. "Grandma can't wait to meet you." Screenshot. Folder labeled Third-Party Alienation. Every time they used the words our baby, my son, or we, I cataloged it. They were publicly declaring their intent to breach the contract. They were providing me with a timeline of premeditated theft. Then I turned to the financials. I pulled 3 years of bank statements. I highlighted every transfer from our joint account to Briar, rent payments, grocery bills, the expensive prenatal vitamins. I built a spreadsheet showing that I had funded 100% of this pregnancy. I was not abandoning the child. I was the primary investor. But my biggest breakthrough came 3 days later. On a Friday night, I was going through our insurance portal to download my own explanation of benefits for therapy. I expected to be locked out. I assumed Gavin, in his efficiency, would have changed the passwords or removed me from the policy immediately. He hadn't. It was a classic oversight. Gavin was good at the big picture, but he often missed the administrative details. He had probably assumed that since the divorce wasn't final, he couldn't remove me, or he was just too busy playing house to log in. I clicked on the Dependents tab. There she was, Briar Murphy. We had added her to our policy as a surrogate dependent to cover the pregnancy complications that weren't covered by her catastrophic plan. I clicked on claims. The list populated instantly. I could see everything, every doctor's visit, every lab result, every ultrasound. I saw that she had an appointment at Stonegate Women's Center 2 days ago. I clicked on the claim details. The diagnosis code was for routine prenatal checkup, 32 weeks, but there was a note in the provider summary. Patient reports increased Braxton Hicks. Cervical check shows 1 centimeter dilation. Advised pelvic rest. I sat back in my cheap office chair, my heart hammering. She was dilating. The baby was coming sooner than the original due date. They weren't telling me. If I hadn't found this, I would have been waiting for a call that would never come. They intended to have this baby. Sign the birth certificate with Gavin as the father and Briar as the mother, claiming it was a natural birth, and leaving me off the paperwork entirely and present it to me as a fait accompli. I picked up the phone and called Daphne. "They are at Stonegate Women's Center," I said, "and she is already 1 centimeter dilated." "Good," Daphne said. "I am drafting a letter to the Stonegate Legal Department and their risk management officer. We are going to put them on notice. We are attaching a copy of the court-ordered surrogacy agreement and a cease and desist regarding any birth certificate registration that does not list Mackenzie Murphy as the mother. Hospitals hate liability. Mackenzie. Once they know there is a legal dispute, they will lock that delivery room down." "Do it," I said. "I am also preparing an emergency ex parte order for custody," Daphne added. "We will have it ready to file the second she is admitted for labor." We will have a judge sign it within the hour. You need to be ready to move." "I am ready," I said. The days in the studio turned into weeks. The silence from my family was deafening. They didn't call. They didn't text. They sent the divorce papers through a process server who knocked on my door at 7 in the morning. I signed for them with a polite smile. I realized they were interpreting my silence as weakness. They thought I was hiding in shame. They thought I was broken. My mother posted a status update on Facebook. "Please pray for our family during this transition. Sometimes God removes people from your life to make room for blessings." It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to comment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn it all down. But I channeled that rage into my checklist. Item 1, bag packed for the hospital. Neutral colors. Professional attire. I needed to look like the mother, not a visitor. Item 2, car seat. I bought a new one and practiced installing it in my sedan until I could do it in under 2 minutes. Item 3, witnesses. I called my friend Elena. Elena was a colleague at Summit and Vale. She was sharp, unsentimental, and she knew how to keep a secret. "I need you to be on standby," I told her over coffee. "When I go to the hospital, I need a witness, someone who is not family, someone who can testify that I was calm, rational, and present." "I am there," Elena said, gripping her cup. "Just say the word. I hate what they are doing to you. Mac." "Hate is not useful," I said, repeating the mantra I had developed. "Evidence is useful. I was living 2 lives. By day, I went to work, crushed my meetings, and smiled at my coworkers. By night, I sat in my studio, refreshing the insurance portal and the court docket, waiting for the signal. I felt like a spider sitting in the center of a web. I wasn't trapping them. They were walking into the trap I had simply illuminated. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I stared at the screen. It was a local area code. The message read, "Breyer says you won't fight. She says you know you're not the real mom. You should just let them be happy." I stared at the words. It was likely one of Breyer's friends, someone she had spun her sob story to, a flying monkey sent to poke the bear, to see if I would react. I felt a cold calm wash over me. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. They really thought I was gone. They really thought I had accepted my erasure. They had no idea that I knew about the dilation. They had no idea I had the insurance logs. They had no idea that a process server was standing by with a stack of documents that would freeze their world in place. I typed a response. 2 words. Simple, unambiguous. "Watch me." I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I turned off the phone and turned back to my whiteboard. The timeline was almost complete. The due date was irrelevant now. The baby was coming on my schedule. Work became my anesthesia. In the weeks following my departure from the house on Elm Street, I did not just return to Summit and Vale. I attacked it. The grief that should have paralyzed me was converted into a cold, hard fuel that powered 14-hour days. I took over a failing risk assessment project for a logistics company in Chicago and dismantled their inefficiencies with a ruthlessness that made the junior analysts nervous. My boss, a man named Marcus, who usually communicated in grunts and nods, stopped by my cubicle on a Tuesday morning. He leaned against the partition, holding a cup of coffee, watching me type. "You are terrifying lately." "Murphy," he said. He meant it as a compliment. "Client approval is up 15%, but you have that look in your eye, like you are ready to fire someone just for breathing too loud. It is scary in a good way." "Chaos requires containment," I said, not looking up from my screen. "I am just doing my job." "Keep it up," he said, pushing off the wall. "Just remember to go home occasionally." He did not know that home was now a 400-square-foot box filled with legal binders, or that my job was simply a way to keep my brain from eating itself while I waited for my child to be born. I needed more than work. Though, I needed to understand the battlefield. Daphne Monroe was excellent at the law, but she had never stood in a delivery room while her sister tried to steal her baby. I needed to talk to someone who had lost, so I could learn how to win. I found a support group for third-party reproduction legal battles. It met in the basement of a community center on the west side. The coffee was terrible, and the lighting was fluorescent yellow, but the stories were raw, That was where I met Valerie. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a cynicism that matched my own. She had lost custody of her biological child to a surrogate 5 years ago in a case that had set a messy precedent in the state. We sat in a diner afterward, nursing herbal tea. "You want to know where I went wrong?" Valerie asked, stirring a packet of honey into her cup. I got emotional. I went into that courtroom and I cried. I screamed that she was a thief. I begged the judge to look at the genetics. She took a sip, her eyes distant. "And the surrogate?" I asked. "She sat there like the Virgin Mary," Valerie said bitterly. Quiet, demure. She let her lawyer do the talking. She played the bond card. She said the baby knew her heartbeat. She said ripping the baby away would cause psychological trauma. The judge was an old man. He saw a crying, hysterical genetic mother and a calm, nurturing birth mother. He ruled for stability. He ruled for the bond. I felt a chill slide down my spine. That was exactly Breyer's strategy. The weeping. The "I feel him moving" speeches. "So what do I do?" I asked. Valerie leaned across the table. "You do not shed a tear, Mackenzie. You do not raise your voice. You become the most boring, stable, predictable person in that room. You make them look like the chaos. You make yourself the bedrock, and you find the money trail. It is always about money." Valerie was right. I went back to my studio and dug deeper into Breyer's finances. I had assumed she was doing this for emotional reasons, the savior complex, the desire to be needed. But when I ran a comprehensive background check using the software we used for corporate vetting, I found the rot beneath the floorboards. Breyer was drowning. She had 3 maxed-out credit cards totaling $28,000. She had a personal loan that was in default, and most damning of all, she had thousands of dollars in unpaid medical bills from before the pregnancy bills she had hidden from me and Gavin. It all clicked into place. The emotional bond was real. Perhaps, but it was fortified by panic. If she gave the baby to me, she went back to her drafty apartment and her debt. If she stayed with Gavin, she got the house, the lifestyle, and a husband who earned 6 figures. She wasn't just stealing my baby. She was stealing my financial security because she had failed to build her own. Gavin called me 2 nights later. It was the first time he had reached out directly since I signed the divorce petition. "Mackenzie," he said. His voice sounded strained, lacking the confident cadence he usually employed. "We need to talk about the house." "What about it?" I asked, putting him on speaker while I organized my evidence folders. "I can't refinance it to buy you out until the divorce is final," he said. "The rates are climbing. I was hoping we could expedite the process. Maybe settle the custody issue out of court so the judge signs off faster." "You want me to sign away my son so you can get a better interest rate?" I asked, my voice flat. "I want us to move on," Gavin said, shifting tactics. "Look, Kenzie, I know you are hurt, but think about the stress you are under. Do you really want to raise a child alone in a studio apartment Breyer and I are set up? We have the room. We have the family support. Your parents are here every day. Don't make this ugly. Just let it be." I stopped organizing the papers. I held the phone up to my mouth. "You want me to stop it from getting ugly?" I asked. "Yes," he said, sounding relieved. "For everyone's sake." "Do you mean ugly?" I asked. "Or do you mean truthful, because the truth is often very ugly?" "Gavin, and I'm quite fond of the truth these days." There was a long silence on the line. "You are being vindictive," he said finally, his voice cold again. "I am being a mother," I said, "and I am busy." "Goodbye, Gavin." I hung up. My hands were not shaking. Valerie's advice was working. The next assault came from the flanks. My parents requested a lunch. They chose a neutral location, a crowded bistro downtown, likely to prevent me from causing a scene. I arrived 5 minutes early. I wore a navy blazer and kept my hair pulled back. I looked like I was going to a deposition, not a family meal. When Diane and Frank arrived, they looked tired. They looked like people who were trying very hard to convince themselves they were the good guys. "We just want peace," my mother said after the waiter took our drink orders. "Mackenzie, this silence, it is killing us. We are a family. I am not the one who broke the family." "Mom," I said, unfolding my napkin. "It is complicated," my father said, drumming his fingers on the table. "Gavin and Briar it happened. We can't undo it, but the baby needs his mother. I am his mother," I said. "My DNA, my egg, my intent." "But Briar is carrying him," Diane said, her voice rising in pitch. "She is feeding him with her body. That is a bond you can't break with a piece of paper. Family is blood. Mackenzie, you have to understand that." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me, who had supposedly taught me right from wrong. I saw their fear. They were afraid of Briar's fragility, so they were willing to sacrifice my strength. They knew I could survive the loss, but they didn't think Briar could, so I was the designated victim. "You are right," I said quietly. "Family is blood, but blood does not give you permission to commit armed robbery, and that is what this is. They are stealing a life, and you are driving the getaway car." I stood up. I didn't touch my water. "I won't be eating. Enjoy your lunch." I walked out. I deleted their numbers from my favorites list before I even reached my car. I focused on the one thing I could control: the environment my son would come home to. I knew Gavin and Briar had the nursery on Elm Street. It was likely filled with expensive toys, hand-painted murals, and the suffocating weight of their deceit. I created the opposite. In the corner of my studio, I set up a space that was pure, functional, and fiercely loving. I bought a white crib, a gray rocking chair, a small dresser. There were no frills, no themes, no unnecessary clutter. It was a space of clarity. I taped a picture of the sonogram to the wall above the crib. "You are coming here," I whispered to the grainy black and white image. "It is small, but it is honest, and it is yours." Daphne Monroe came to visit the studio a week before the due date. She inspected the setup with a critical eye. "It is good," she said. "It shows preparation. It shows you have a plan, but we need more. Mackenzie, the judge might look at this and see a sad woman building a shrine. We need proof of their malice. We need proof that they are actively trying to erase you before the baby is even born." "I have the social media posts," I said, pointing to the whiteboard. "I have the financial records." "We need intent," Daphne said. "Hard intent. Have they tried to change the medical records? Have they tried to alter the birth plan legally?" "Not that I can see," I said. "The hospital is on notice. They can't change the birth certificate without flagging the system." "Keep digging," Daphne said. "Briar is impulsive. She will try to cement her claim. Find out how." I went back to the digital trail. I spent 2 days scouring every possible registry, every government portal I could access with my remaining shared credentials. I found nothing on the state vital records site. I found nothing on the hospital portal. Then, I remembered an app Gavin used. It was a shared family organizer app we had used for grocery lists and schedules. He had removed me from the calendar, but he hadn't deleted the account history. I logged in. I went to the trash folder, hoping to find a deleted note or a list. There was nothing there. Frustrated. I went to the linked accounts section. I saw a connection to a baby naming website, one of those sites where you can order custom monogrammed blankets and wall art. I clicked the link. It auto-logged me in because the password was saved in the browser cache from when we used the same iPad. I went to order history. There was an order placed yesterday. Pending shipment. It was a custom wooden sign, the kind meant to be hung over a crib or used for a newborn photo announcement. I clicked on the preview image. The name carved into the wood was not the name Gavin and I had agreed on. We had chosen Thomas, after my grandfather. The sign read, Gavin Jr., but it wasn't just the name, it was the full text below it. Gavin Jr., the perfect blend of Gavin Briar. And below that, in smaller text, born to be ours. I stared at the screen. They weren't just changing the name. They were inscribing their lie onto a piece of wood, intending to hang it over my son's head as the first thing he saw. They were planning to announce him to the world as a product of their affair, erasing my genetic existence entirely. "Got you," I whispered. I took a screenshot. I downloaded the invoice. I printed it out and pinned it to the center of my whiteboard. It was the smoking gun. It was proof that they weren't just confused or emotional. They were rewriting history. And then, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the insurance portal. A new authorization request, admission, labor delivery. It was time. The notification I received about Briar's admission to labor and delivery turned out to be the opening salvo of a siege, not the final battle. It was a false alarm preterm contractions brought on by stress and dehydration. They kept her for 24 hours, pumped her full of fluids, and sent her home with strict instructions for bed rest. But that scare changed the atmosphere. It shifted the conflict from a Cold War into active combat. The moment Briar was discharged, Daphne Monroe and I launched our preemptive strike. We did not wait for them to try the name game again. Daphne drafted a formal letter of intent and had it couriered to Gavin, Briar, and the legal department of the Stonegate Women's Center. The letter was brutal in its clarity. It stated that any attempt to register the birth certificate with false information specifically, listing Briar Murphy as the mother, or listing the child's name as anything other than the one agreed upon in the notarized contract would be treated as civil fraud. We attached the invoice for the Gavin Jr. sign I had found, citing it as evidence of premeditated intent to breach. We also included a grim reminder in our state. Knowingly falsifying a vital record is a felony. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Briar, unable to fight me in the legal arena where she was woefully outgunned, took the battle to the only place where she felt powerful, the court of public opinion. I was sitting in my studio apartment, cross-referencing bank statements, when my friend Elena texted me, "Don't look at Facebook." She wrote, "Actually, do look," and screenshot it. I opened the app. Briar had posted a long, rambling essay. She had set the privacy to public. I never thought my own sister would turn her back on family. She wrote, "I offered my body to give her a gift. I have given up alcohol, sushi, my sleep, and my comfort for 8 months. And now I am being threatened with lawyers because I dare to love the baby I'm carrying. It is funny how money makes people think they own human beings. I feel like a rental car, not a sister. Just because someone pays the bills doesn't mean they have a heart. Please pray for me and Gavin as we fight to keep this baby in a home filled with love, not just contracts." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She left out the affair. She left out the fact that the gift was originally my genetic child. She painted a picture of a wealthy, barren woman exploiting her poor, fertile sister. The comments were a river of vitriol directed at me. "That is disgusting. Rich people think they can buy anything. Keep that baby. Mama biology is love, not paperwork. Stay strong. Briar, we are behind you." I felt a physical sickness in my stomach, a heavy, leaden weight. I wanted to reply. I wanted to post the screenshots of the text messages where she called the baby the package back in the 2nd month. I wanted to post the receipts of the $20,000 I had transferred to her for living expenses, but I didn't. I remembered Valerie's advice from the support group. Be the rock. Let them be the storm. I took screenshots of the post and every single comment. I saved them in a folder named Defamation and Harassment. Then I went to work. I walked into the Summit and Vale office with my head high, ignoring the whispers I imagined were circulating. I did not defend myself. I let my silence be the loudest thing in the room. Gavin, however, could not handle the silence. He began to crack. He called me on a Tuesday night. It started as a negotiation. "Mackenzie, this letter from your lawyer is heavy-handed," he said. He sounded tired. "Civil fraud. A felony. We are just trying to figure out what is best for the boy." "The boy has a name," I said, my voice steady. "And it is not Gavin Jr. "Why are you doing this?" he snapped, his tone shifting from conciliatory to aggressive in a heartbeat. "You don't even have a nursery set up. You are living in a studio apartment. I have the house. I have the support system. I will fight you. Kenzie. I will spend every dime I have to prove that you are unfit. You are emotionally unstable. Living alone. No judge is going to give a newborn to a woman having a midlife crisis in a rental unit." "I am not having a crisis, Gavin," I said. "I am managing a risk. And as for spending every dime you have, you might want to check the joint account." He paused. "What?" "I froze the assets," I said. "Half of that savings account is mine. The other half is now subject to equitable distribution during the divorce proceedings. You can't use marital funds to pay for a lawyer to steal our marital child. Daphne filed the motion this morning. You can't do that, he stammered. I already did, I replied. And Gavin, if you want to talk about who paid for what, I have the spreadsheet ready for the judge. I paid the IVF clinic. I paid the agency fees. I paid the surrogate's rent. I paid for the prenatal vitamins. I effectively hold the receipt for this entire pregnancy. If you want to claim him, you better be prepared to write me a check for $140,000 by Friday. Can you do that? He hung up. The financial pressure was working, but the emotional war was escalating. My mother, Diane, decided that if she couldn't legally make Briar the mother, she would socially coronate her. She organized a sprinkle a baby shower for Briar 2 weeks before the due date. They held it at my parents' house. They didn't invite me, obviously, but in the age of social media, you don't need an invitation to see the crime scene. My cousin, a sweet girl who didn't quite understand the intricacies of the feud, posted a video to her story. I watched it in my dark apartment. The living room was filled with balloons. Briar was sitting in my grandmother's rocking chair, wearing a sash that said, Mommy-to-be. My father, Frank, was making a toast. He held up a glass of champagne. To Briar, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Who stepped up when destiny called? To the real mother. The room applauded. I saw my aunts, my neighbors, people I had known my whole life, clapping. They were celebrating a theft. They were drinking punch and eating cake while actively participating in the erasure of my existence. Look at her, my mother's voice came from behind the camera. She was born for this. I saved the video. I sent it to Daphne. Subject evidence of alienation, message. They are publicly identifying her as the legal mother and excluding the biological and contractual mother. This supports our claim that they intend to breach the custody agreement immediately upon birth. Daphne replied 3 minutes later. Got it. This is gold. It contradicts their affidavit that they are just co-parenting. This is replacement. Frank, realizing that the family values speech wasn't going to work on a judge, tried to find a new legal avenue. I learned through the grapevine my friend Elena overheard Gavin talking on the phone in the lobby of our old building that Frank was shopping around for a high-powered shark to break the contract. He went to 3 different firms. The feedback was apparently unanimous. Daphne Monroe was known as the Iron Lady of fertility law for a reason. The contract she had drafted was not just a piece of paper. It was a fortress. It had clauses for behavioral breach, financial breach, and emotional distress. It explicitly stated that genetic contribution and intent to parent superseded gestational bonding. Frank had money, but he didn't have a case. They were trapped. Desperation makes people do irrational things, and Briar was desperate. 5 days before the due date, my phone alerted me to a location change on the shared ride-sharing app account. I had forgotten to remove myself from it, or perhaps I had left it there subconsciously as a tripwire. A car had been requested from Briar's address. The destination was not Stonegate Women's Center, the hospital named in our contract. The destination was Mercy General, a hospital across the county line. I looked at the time. It was 11 at night. I called Daphne. They are moving, I said. They are going to Mercy General. They are trying to bypass the Stonegate legal hold. If she delivers at Mercy, Daphne said, her voice crisp and awake. We lose our immediate leverage. Mercy doesn't have the court order on file. They will default to the woman giving birth as the mother. What do I do? I asked, grabbing my keys. I am calling the risk management officer at Mercy, Daphne said. I have him on speed dial. You get to Stonegate. If they are diverting, it means she is in labor. I will force them back. I drove to Stonegate, but I pulled over into a gas station parking lot halfway there to wait for Daphne's confirmation. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. This was the chase. 10 minutes later, Daphne called me back. It is handled, she said. I spoke to the administrator at Mercy. I informed them that admitting Briar Murphy would make them party to a breach of contract carrying a multi-million-dollar liability. I sent them the order. They turned the car away at the emergency room bay. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They turned a woman in labor away. She wasn't crowning, Daphne said. She was at 4 centimeters, Stable enough for transfer. They told the ambulance to take her to her contracted facility. They are en route to Stonegate now. Gavin is reportedly furious. He threatened to sue the hospital. Let him, I said. He can't afford it. They will be at Stonegate in 20 minutes, Daphne said. The legal team there is ready. Security has been briefed. Briar checks in as a surrogate. You are listed as the mother. The protocol is active. I sat in my car, staring at the rain streaking the windshield. I had won the tactical maneuver. I had forced them back onto my terrain, but the victory felt hollow. My son was about to be born into a war zone. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Briar. She must have been in the back of the ambulance or the car, scared and angry, realizing that every exit door she tried to open was locked by my signature. You think you are winning. The text read, You think because you have the best lawyer and the most money that you own him, but you can't buy what we have. I feel him. He knows my voice. He calms down when I sing to him. You can win the contract. Mackenzie. But I have already won because he loves me. You will just be the stranger who took him away. I stared at the glowing screen. It was the last weapon she had the attempt to inflict a wound that would never heal. She wanted me to believe that I was the kidnapper. She wanted me to doubt my own motherhood. But I looked at the dashboard of my car. I looked at the car seat in the back. I looked at the folder of evidence that proved I had fought for this child every single day, while she had simply drifted along on a tide of entitlement. I typed my reply slowly, my fingers steady. He is not a prize to be won. Briar, he is a child, and he will be loved the right way. Not by people who lie to him, not by people who steal. He will be loved by the person who put him first, even when it broke her heart. Real love isn't built on betrayal. I hit send. Then I put the car in drive and headed towards Stonegate. The countdown was over. The last 14 days felt less like waiting for a birth, and more like the final countdown of a bomb disposal operation. My life had contracted into a single, razor-sharp focus, the inevitable moment my phone would light up with the admission alert. I lived in a state of suspended animation. My studio apartment, once a place of refuge, had transformed into a staging ground. The small dining table was no longer used for meals. It was covered in stacks of paper, each pile clipped and labeled with the obsessive precision of a forensic accountant. I had the medical power of attorney in a red folder. I had the gestational surrogacy agreement, the original, notarized document with Briar's flourish of a signature in a blue folder. I had the emergency custody order, stamped and signed by a judge who had seen the evidence of their intent to abscond. In a bright yellow envelope that screamed, "Read me first," I had packed my hospital bag, but it contained no cute matching robes or fuzzy socks. It contained a black blazer, a white silk blouse, and tailored trousers. I was not going to the hospital to be a mother in the soft, sentimental sense. I was going as the CEO of this child's life. I packed a second bag for the baby-neutral onesies, a hypoallergenic blanket I had washed 3 times in unscented detergent, and the car seat base, which sat by the door like a sentry. Daphne Monroe was moving pieces on the chessboard that Gavin and Briar didn't even know existed. She had spent the last week in direct communication with the legal department of Stonegate Women's Center. The file is flagged. Mackenzie. Daphne told me over the phone on a Tuesday morning. Her voice was calm, the voice of a general who has already won the war but still has to fight the battle. I spoke with their general counsel. They have placed a high-risk custody alert on Briar's patient profile. The moment she checks in, security is notified. The head nurse on the labor and delivery floor has a copy of the court order. They are not going to let Gavin sign that birth certificate. They are not going to let Briar leave the ward with the infant. The hospital is terrified of a lawsuit. We have made you the path of least resistance. And the police? I asked, pacing the length of my small room. On standby, Daphne said. If they try to physically block you, or if they try to leave against medical advice with the baby, hospital security will call the precinct. We have the law. Mackenzie. Now we just need the timing. I needed a witness. I could not walk into that room alone. If it was just me against Gavin, Briar, and my parents, it would be my word against a hysterical family. I needed a third party, someone cold, sober, and unimpeachable. I called Elena. I need you to be ready, I told her. It could be 2 in the morning. It could be noon on a workday. Can you do it? I have a bag in my trunk, Elena said. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer platitudes. I am the designated driver for your justice, Mac. Just say when. While I sharpened my knives in the dark, Gavin and Briar were dancing in the light, drunk on their own hubris. Gavin posted a photo on Instagram 3 days before the due date. It was a picture of the nursery in the house on Elm Street, the house I had paid for. The room I had painted. They had finished it. It was a masterpiece of expensive taste. There was a hand-carved rocking horse. There was a crib that cost more than my first car. The caption read, "Ready for the pitter-patter of little feet. The waiting is the hardest part. But building this home for you has been the greatest joy of my life." To life. New chapter. He was celebrating. He genuinely believed he had won. He thought that because I was silent, I was defeated. He thought my absence was acquiescence. He had no idea that every time he posted, he was handing me another bullet. I printed the photo. I added it to the dossier under evidence of exclusion. But it was Briar's behavior that turned my blood to ice. She began posting videos of herself talking to the baby. In one, she was rubbing her stomach, her eyes closed, swaying to music I couldn't hear. "I can't wait to meet my girl," she whispered in the video. "My sweet, precious girl. Mommy has so many dresses waiting for you." I stared at the screen, baffled. My girl. I pulled up the genetic report from the embryo transfer, the report I had memorized 8 months ago. It was a male embryo. We had transferred a male embryo. I checked the portal again. The ultrasounds confirmed it. It was a boy. Briar wasn't just lying to the world. She was lying to herself. She wanted a daughter perhaps to recreate our own twin dynamic, to create a mini Briar she could mold, and she had simply decided that reality would bend to her will. She was buying pink dresses for a son. It was a level of delusion that terrified me. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was psychosis. I saved the video. I sent it to Daphne with a note. She thinks it is a girl. The medical records clearly state male. She is detached from reality. Daphne's reply was immediate. "This is excellent. It proves she is not treating this as a medical process, but as a fantasy. It supports our claim of psychological instability." I stayed silent. I let them spin their narratives. I let my mother comment, "So beautiful," on every lie. I let my father tell his golf buddies he was getting a granddaughter. Their noise was my cover. Then, on Thursday evening, the silence broke in a way I didn't expect. I was heating up soup in my kitchenette when my phone rang. It was Gavin. I hesitated. Daphne had told me not to engage unless necessary, but something in the rhythm of the ring, or maybe just my own intuition, told me to answer. "Hello?" I said. "Can you meet me?" Gavin asked. He didn't say hello. His voice was low, hurried. "Not at the house. There is a coffee shop on 4th and Main, the one with the drive-thru. Can you be there in 20 minutes? "Why?" I asked. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Before the baby comes, please, Kenzie, just 10 minutes, I agreed. I drove to the coffee shop, parking in the darkest corner of the lot. I kept the doors locked. I kept my phone recording in my pocket. Gavin's car pulled up 2 minutes later. He got out and walked over to my window. He looked terrible. The confident, arrogant man from the nursery photo was gone. His eyes were rimmed with red. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. He looked like a man who was being eaten alive by his own conscience. I rolled the window down 3 inches. "What do you want, Gavin?" He leaned against the car, looking at the pavement. "I don't know if we are doing the right thing," he whispered. I felt a flicker of hope, not for us, but for him. "Then stop it," I said. "It is not too late. You can stop this insanity right now. You can acknowledge the contract. You can tell Briar no." "She is so fragile, Kenzie," he said, his voice cracking. "She believes it. She really believes it. If I take this away from her, it will kill her. And your parents, they are pushing so hard. They say this is the only way to keep the family whole." "My parents are not the ones who will go to jail for kidnapping," I said coldly. You are the one whose name is on the line. Gavin, do you really want to start fatherhood with a felony?" He looked up at me then. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was weak. He had always been weak, swayed by whoever shouted the loudest. For years, I had been the loudest voice. So he had followed me. Now, Briar and my parents were screaming, and he was following them. I just wanted a family, he said, a tear slipping down his cheek. I just wanted to be a dad. You are going to be a dad, I said. But you don't get to choose the mother just because you like her narrative better. I am the mother, Gavin. You can't edit me out. He opened his mouth to speak. He looked like he was about to fold. He looked like he was about to say, "Okay, let's stop." Then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. He looked at the screen. I saw the caller ID light up. Diane, my mother. Gavin stared at the screen for a long second. Then, physically, I saw the door close. He straightened his spine. He wiped the tear away. He put the phone back in his pocket without answering. But the spell was broken. The puppet strings had been pulled. I can't, he said, his voice hardening again. It is too late. The baby belongs with Briar. She loves him more. You are just cold. Mackenzie, look at you. You are recording this, aren't you? Yes, I said. See, he sneered, backing away. That is why you shouldn't be a mother. You are a lawyer, not a mom. He got back in his car and drove away. I sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline subside. He had come close to the edge, looked down at the truth, and decided the lie was safer. I felt a finality settle over me. There was no saving him. I drove back to the studio. I didn't sleep. I sat in the rocking chair, staring at the empty crib, waiting. The call came at 4:30 in the morning. It wasn't Gavin. It wasn't my parents. It was the automated notification from the Stonegate patient portal, linked to the insurance ID I had memorized. Patient admitted Murphy. Briar, unit labor and delivery, status active labor. This was it. I stood up. I felt strangely calm. The shaking was gone. The fear was gone. There was only the mission. I called Elena. Go, was all I said. I called Daphne. She is checked in. I am already up, Daphne said. I am contacting the hospital legal desk now. The security team will be at the elevator. Meet me in the lobby in 20 minutes. I hung up. I walked to the small bathroom in the corner of the studio. I turned on the harsh overhead light and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like the woman who had cried in Dr. Evans' office a year ago. I didn't look like the woman who had begged her husband to love her. My face was pale, but my eyes were dark and steady. I applied a coat of red lipstick, my war paint. I brushed my hair back into a sleek, severe bun. I put on the black blazer. I picked up the dossier. I am not going there to beg, I said to my reflection, my voice echoing in the small, tiled room. I am not going there to ask for permission. I am going to collect what is mine. I grabbed the car seat. I walked out of the studio and into the pre-dawn darkness. The countdown was over. The explosion was about to begin. The automatic doors of Stonegate Women's Center slid open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a seal breaking. The air inside was crisp, smelling of floor wax and antiseptic, the scent of controlled chaos. I walked in the center of a phalanx. To my left was Daphne Monroe, carrying her leather briefcase like a shield. To my right was Elena, my witness, holding a notepad and looking grimly determined. We did not stop at the general information desk. We walked straight to the elevators, bypassing the bewildered night security guard, who started to rise from his chair until Daphne flashed her badge and the court order in a single, fluid motion. Legal counsel, she said, not breaking stride. Expected on the 4th floor. The elevator ride was silent. The mirrored walls reflected a woman I barely recognized. I was wearing the black blazer I had packed. My spine was a steel rod. My hands, resting by my sides, were perfectly still. I was not a wife coming to support her husband. I was not a sister coming to hold a hand. I was a creditor coming to collect a debt that was 9 months overdue. When the doors opened on the labor and delivery floor, the atmosphere changed. It was 4:45 in the morning. The hallway was dim, lit by the glow of computer monitors at the nurses' station. A head nurse, a woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun and a badge that read, "Charge Nurse Miller," looked up as we approached. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized me, or rather, recognized the situation. "Mrs. Murphy," she asked, standing up. "Ms. Murphy," I corrected gently. "Mackenzie, this is my attorney, Daphne Monroe." Daphne stepped forward, placing the yellow envelope on the high counter. "We are here pursuant to the emergency custody order filed with Judge Holloway regarding the patient in room 412, Briar Murphy. We need to verify that the security protocols are active." Nurse Miller didn't even look at the papers. She tapped her keyboard, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "The flag is on the file," she confirmed, her voice low. "Patient admitted at 4 centimeters. She is currently at 8. We have security stationed at the fire exit, as per the risk assessment. Dr. Henderson is the attending physician. She has been briefed that no birth certificate paperwork is to be issued to the biological father without your wet signature." "And the access?" Daphne asked. "You are the legal mother." Nurse Miller said, looking me in the eye. "You have unrestricted access. The father, Mr. Murphy, has been trying to bar entry to anyone but family, but legally, you are the only parent on record who matters right now." "Thank you," I said. "They are in room 412, the nurse said, pointing down the hall. "It is a bit loud in there." I nodded. I turned to Elena. "Stay by the door. Record the time of entry. If anyone touches me, you call the police immediately." "Got it," Elena whispered. I walked down the corridor. The floor tiles were speckled gray, counting down the steps to the end of my marriage and the beginning of my motherhood. I could hear voices before I even reached the door. "You can do this, sweetie. Just breathe." That was my mother, Diane. "She is doing great. She is a natural." That was my father, Frank. "I am right here, Bree. I am not going anywhere." That was Gavin. They were a closed ecosystem, a perfect, hermetic bubble of delusion. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The room was bathed in the warm, golden light of the bedside lamps, a stark contrast to the harsh hallway. Briar was propped up in the bed, sweat matting her hair to her forehead, her face contorted in a grimace of pain. Gavin was standing by her left shoulder, wiping her face with a cloth. My parents were at the foot of the bed. For a split second, no one moved. It was a tableau of a family interrupted. Then, Gavin looked up. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical shutter closing. "Mackenzie," he breathed. The name hit the room like a grenade. My mother spun around. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits of fury. "What are you doing here? We told you to stay away. This is a private moment." "It is a medical procedure," I said, my voice cutting through the humid, warm air of the room. "Involving my son." "There is nothing private about it." Gavin let go of Briar's hand and took a step toward me. His posture was aggressive, defensive. "Get out. Mackenzie, don't do this. Not now. She is in transition. You are going to stress her out." "I am not doing anything. Gavin," I said, holding my ground. Daphne stepped up beside me, silently presenting the clipboard with the court order. "I am simply executing the document you signed. Article 14. I am required to be present for the birth to authorize the release of the child." "She is ruining it," Briar wailed from the bed. It was a high, thin sound. "Get her out. She is stealing my moment." "Security," my father barked, looking around for a call button. "Call security. Get this woman out of here." "Security is already here, Frank," Daphne said coolly. 2 uniformed hospital security guards stepped into the doorway behind us. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at my father, who had started to advance toward me with his fists clenched. "Sir," one of the guards said, his voice bored but heavy with threat. "Step back. Ms. Murphy has the legal right to be here. If you cause a disturbance, we will escort you from the building." Frank froze. He looked at the guards, then at me. "She is your daughter," he hissed. "Briar is your sister. How can you be so cold? Family is supposed to protect each other." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Family doesn't plot to kidnap a child for 9 months. Family doesn't lie about dilation. Family doesn't rewrite names on a birth certificate." "We were doing it for the baby," Diane screamed. She was crying now. Ugly. Hysterical tears. He needs a mother who is warm, who is present. Look at you. You are dressed for a board meeting. You don't have a maternal bone in your body. I am dressed for court, I corrected her. Because that is where you forced me to live. I walked past them. I walked past the hatred in my mother's eyes and the impotence in my father's stance. I walked to the side of the bed opposite Gavin. Briar looked up at me. Her eyes were glassy, dilated with pain and adrenaline. She looked young, terrified, and for a second, I felt a flicker of the old instinct, the twin instinct to comfort her. But then she spoke. He is mine, she wheezed, clutching her stomach as another contraction hit. I feel him. Kenzie, you don't know what it is like. He knows my heartbeat. He calms down when I speak. You can't paper over a bond. It is spiritual. She was playing the card Valerie had warned me about, the mystical bond defense. I looked down at her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I leaned in close, so only she and Gavin could hear me clearly. You feel him, I said softly. Because I paid $20,000 for the transfer. You feel him because I paid your rent so you could rest. You feel him because you convinced yourself that biology is a negotiation. I paused, letting the words sink in. You don't feel a bond, Briar. You feel the entitlement of a thief who thought she wouldn't get caught. You feel him because you thought you were allowed to rob me. Briar let out a sob that turned into a scream as the contraction peaked. The monitor spiked. Dr. Henderson, the physician, breezed into the room, flanked by 2 nurses. She took in the scene, the security guards, the lawyer, the tension thick enough to choke on, and didn't blink. She was a professional. All right, Dr. Henderson said, snapping on latex gloves. I see we have a full house. Briar, I need you to focus. You are 10 centimeters. It is time to push. Get her out, Briar screamed again, pointing at me. Ms. Murphy stays, Dr. Henderson said, her voice brooking no argument. She is the medical power of attorney. If you want this baby delivered safely, you will focus on your breathing and stop focusing on the audience. The next 20 minutes were a blur of medical commands and guttural sounds. I stood like a statue. I watched my sister push. I watched Gavin hold her hand, weeping, whispering promises he couldn't keep. You are doing it. We are going to be a family. Just one more, he sobbed. He was still living in the fantasy. He truly believed that once the baby was out, the sheer force of their love would dissolve the contract. Here we go, Dr. Henderson announced. Head is out. One more big one. Briar, Briar screamed, a raw, tearing sound. And then, silence, followed by a wet, sputtering cry. My heart stopped. The world narrowed down to that sound. It is a boy, Dr. Henderson announced. Time of birth? 5:12 a.m.? A boy. I looked at Briar. She collapsed back against the pillows, panting, a look of expectancy on her face. She reached her arms out. Give her to me, she whispered. Give me my girl. It is a boy. Briar, Dr. Henderson said, her voice gentle but firm. It is a healthy baby boy. Briar blinked. No, she murmured. No, it is a girl. I know it is a girl. The delusion shattered in real time. I saw the confusion cloud her eyes. She looked at Gavin. Gavin, it is a girl, right? Gavin didn't answer. He was staring at the baby the nurse was wiping down. He looked devastated. The nurse did not hand the baby to Briar. She did not place him on Briar's chest for skin to skin, as was the standard protocol for a mother. Instead, the nurse walked the baby over to the warmer, did the APGAR assessment efficiently, and wrapped him in a hospital blanket. Then, she turned and walked toward me. Mrs. Murphy, the nurse asked, looking at me. Ms. Murphy, I corrected automatically, my voice shaking for the first time. He is perfect, she said, and she placed the bundle in my arms. The weight of him was shocking. He was heavy, warm, and solid. I looked down at the face scrunched up, red, angry at the cold world. He had my nose. He had the Murphy chin. I felt a sob rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't break. Not here. Not in front of them. No, Diane screamed from the corner. That is not right. Let Briar hold him. She just birthed him. She is the gestational carrier, Daphne stated, stepping between my mother and me. The contract stipulates immediate transfer of custody to the intended parent upon birth. The hospital is following the court order. Briar was sobbing now. A keening, broken sound. Let me see him. Just let me see him. He is mine. I looked at my sister. I held my son tight against my chest. He is not yours, Briar, I said quietly. He never was. I turned to the nurse. I have the car seat in the staging room. I am ready to be transferred to the postpartum recovery room designated for adoptive and surrogacy parents. Of course, the nurse said. Right this way. I started to walk toward the door. Gavin, Briar shrieked. Do something. Stop her. Gavin had been standing by the bed, his hand still resting on Briar's arm. He looked at her. He looked at the mess of sweat and tears and delusion. Then he looked at me, standing in the doorway with the child he had claimed he wanted to protect. He looked at his parents, who were shouting at the security guards. He looked like a man waking up from a long, feverish dream to find his house had burned down while he slept. He let go of Briar's hand. Gavin, Briar whispered. Gavin didn't answer her. He walked across the room. He didn't come to me. He walked straight to Daphne Monroe. The room went silent. Diane stopped screaming. Frank stopped posturing. Even Briar stopped crying to watch. They expected him to fight. They expected him to throw a punch, to grab the papers, to scream that he was the father. Gavin looked at Daphne. His eyes were dead. I need to sign something, Gavin said. His voice was hollow, stripped of all the arrogance, all the hope, all the fight. Daphne raised an eyebrow. Sign what? Mr. Murphy. We are not negotiating custody in a delivery room. Not custody, Gavin said. He looked at me then. He looked at the baby in my arms. There was no love in his eyes anymore. There was only a terrible, crushing realization of the ruin he had caused. I need to sign the voluntary termination of parental rights, he said. What? Diane gasped. Gavin, no. I need to sign it, Gavin repeated, his voice rising, cracking with a sudden, violent intensity. Right now, get the paper. I am done. The silence in the delivery room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that follows a structural collapse, the dust settling over the ruins of what used to be a family. Gavin stood in the center of the wreckage, looking at me with eyes that were no longer calculating or affectionate. They were simply exhausted. Daphne Monroe did not miss a beat. She did not gasp. She did not gloat. She simply reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document that was stapled and flagged with a yellow sticky note. It was the stipulation for sole legal and physical custody. This grants Mackenzie Murphy full decision-making authority regarding medical, educational, and religious upbringing, Daphne said, her voice echoing off the tile walls. It restricts your visitation to supervised intervals at the discretion of the mother. It mandates maximum state guideline child support, plus the reimbursement of all surrogacy-related medical costs. Is that what you want to sign, Mr. Murphy? Gavin, my mother, Diane, shrieked. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm. Do not sign that. You are tired. You're emotional. We can fix this. We can go to mediation. Gavin ripped his arm away from her grip with a violence that made her stumble back. There is no fixing this, Diane, Gavin said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud. Look at her. Look at Briar. He pointed to the bed. Briar was staring at the ceiling, muttering about pink dresses and how the ultrasound was wrong. She was completely untethered from reality. I can't raise a child in this, Gavin said, his voice cracking. I thought we were building a family, but we weren't. We were building a trap for Mackenzie, and I am done holding the shovel. You are a coward, my father. Frank roared. After everything we did for you, we took you in. We treated you like a son. You treated me like an accomplice, Gavin spat back. Then, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. I knew you would turn on me, Gavin said. He looked at me. his expression pleading for a shred of forgiveness I did not have to give. Mackenzie, about 3 months ago, when I started getting cold feet when I suggested we maybe tell you the truth, your parents threatened to cut me out of the real estate partnership. They told me I had to stay the course. He tapped the screen. So I started recording, he said. He hit play. The audio was tinny, but the voices were unmistakable. It was a conversation from a Sunday dinner I hadn't been invited to. Diane's voice. We just need to keep Mackenzie isolated until the baby comes. If she feels like she is lost, she will retreat. She always retreats. We just need to make Briar look like the victim. Frank's voice. The contract is just paper. If Gavin holds the baby first, possession is 9/10 of the law. We just need to push Mackenzie out of the picture physically. Change the locks if you have to. Briar's voice. She doesn't deserve him anyway. She's too cold. She treats him like a spreadsheet. I am the only one who really loves him. Gavin hit stop. The room was frozen. The nurses were staring at my parents with open disgust. Doctor. Henderson crossed her arms, looking from Frank to the security guards, silently authorizing them to intervene if necessary. My mother's face had gone the color of old ash. She looked at the phone, then at me. Mackenzie, she stammered, you have to understand. We were worried about the baby. You were plotting to steal him, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the anger they expected. I felt nothing for them. The cord had been cut long before the doctor used her scissors today. You were conspiring to alienate a mother from her child. That is not love. Mom, that is a crime. I turned to Gavin. Sign the papers. Gavin took the clipboard from Daphne. He did not hesitate. He signed his name on the line for father. He signed the waiver of notice. He signed the agreement to pay 100% of the legal fees. I am sorry, he whispered as he handed the clipboard back to Daphne. I know it doesn't matter now, but I didn't want him to grow up in a lie. He deserves the truth, and the truth is, you are the only one who fought for him fairly. You are right, I said. It doesn't matter now, but thank you for doing the one decent thing you have done in 9 months. I turned to the bed. Briar was sitting up now. The reality was starting to seep in through the cracks in her delusion. She saw Gavin standing apart from her. She saw me holding the baby. She saw the papers in Daphne's hand. Gavin, she whimpered. What about the nursery? What about us? There is no us. Briar, Gavin said, not looking at her. I am going to stay at a hotel. You should probably go back to your apartment. Briar let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. But I am the mom. Everyone says so. Mom said so. I stepped closer to the bed. I adjusted the blanket around my son Thomas. I had already named him in my heart. Briar, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, red-rimmed, and full of a terrifying emptiness. You thought this was a performance, I said. You thought if you wore the costumes and said the lines and posted the pictures, you would get the role. You thought motherhood was about the attention? I looked down at Thomas. He was sleeping, oblivious to the war that had been fought for his existence. Motherhood is not a role you audition for, I said, looking back at her. And you have chosen the wrong stage. I turned to Daphne. Are we clear to leave? The hospital has cleared the discharge to you, Daphne said. The security team will escort us to the car. I will file the restraining order and the custody stipulation with the clerk's office at 9 o'clock sharp. Let's go, I said. I walked out of room 412. I did not look back at my parents, who were standing like statues in the ruins of their own arrogance. I did not look back at Gavin, who was slumped in a chair, head in his hands. I did not look back at the sister who had tried to consume my life to fill the void in her own. I walked down the hallway, the wheels of the bassinet clicking rhythmically on the tiles. Elena was waiting by the elevator, tears streaming down her face. You did it, she whispered. We did it, I corrected. We rode the elevator down. We walked out into the cool, gray morning air. The rain had stopped. The sky was beginning to bruise with purple and gold, the sun fighting its way over the horizon. I strapped Thomas into the car seat base I had practiced with for weeks. I got into the driver's seat. I locked the doors, and then, Finally, I drove away. Epilogue. 14 months later, the wind off Lake Michigan was cold, but the sun was bright. I adjusted Thomas's hat, pulling the knit cap down over his ears. He giggled, grabbing my finger with a grip that was surprisingly strong. We were in Chicago. I had moved 3 weeks after the birth. I sold the house on Elm Street without ever stepping foot inside it again. I let the lawyers handle the liquidation of the furniture, the dismantling of the nursery Gavin had built. I took the money, my share, plus the reimbursement Gavin had agreed to, and I bought a brownstone in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood in Lincoln Park. I had a new job as a director of risk management for a logistics firm. The hours were better, the pay was higher, but mostly, no one knew my name. No one knew the story of the Murphy twins. I had no contact with my parents. Daphne had secured a permanent protective order based on the harassment and the conspiracy revealed in Gavin's recording. They were legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Thomas or me. They sent cards to a P.O. box that Daphne's paralegal checked and shredded once a month. Gavin sent checks. He sent them on the 1st of every month, like clockwork. He had moved to the West Coast, taking a job in Seattle. He had seen Thomas twice, for 2 hours each time, in a supervised visitation center. He was awkward, sad, and distant. He was a stranger to my son, and Thomas looked at him with polite curiosity. Nothing more. Briar had vanished into the background noise of social media. Elena told me she had moved back in with our parents, that she was posting vague, spiritual quotes about healing and betrayal. She was still the victim in her own story. I didn't care. Her narrative had no power over me anymore because I wasn't reading the book. I sat on a park bench, watching Thomas try to wobble toward a pigeon. He fell onto his padded bottom and laughed, looking back at me for reassurance. "I see you," I called out to him. "You are okay. Get up." He stood up. He kept going. I took a deep breath of the crisp air. For so long, I had thought my life was a timeline that had been broken. I thought I had to fix it, to tape it back together with contracts and strategies. But looking at my son, I realized the timeline hadn't broken. It had just curved. I had built a fortress to protect him. I had turned my heart into a vault and my mind into a weapon. I had done things that nice girls don't do. I had recorded conversations. I had tracked finances. I had been cold. And because of that, my son was safe. He was happy. He was loved for exactly who he was, not for the fantasy he could fulfill for broken people. I picked Thomas up, pressing a kiss to his cool cheek. He smelled like wind and baby shampoo. "Let's go home," I whispered to him. We walked back toward the brownstone, leaving the shadows of the past where they belonged behind us. They thought they could write the story of my life. They thought they could edit me out of the picture and replace me with a softer, more compliant version. They thought biology was a suggestion and the law was a nuisance. But they forgot the first rule of risk management: never underestimate the person who has nothing left to lose. They thought they were writing a tragedy about a barren woman, but the person who signed the final line of their ending was Gavin, and the person who closed the book was me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of betrayal, strategy, and ultimate justice, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, while cooking dinner, or maybe relaxing before bed? Please leave a comment below with your location and your thoughts on Mackenzie's decision. Did she go too far, or was she completely justified? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Lyra Revenge Stories. Hit the like button to support the channel, and don't forget to press the hype button so this story can reach and inspire even more people. Your support means the world to us.